So I'm just going to do a little bit of a recording demonstrating how to use the CTG layers within TVPaint because it's quite useful to help speed up your coloring process. Here is a quick little animation I did recently, and it's really just a little recursive loop. So we have this leaf working its way up and around to the very top, and then it's kind of folded on itself. So the drawings themselves, there's only 6 of them, and we then have 2 overlays. We have the text overlay, and we have the little pot overlay. And you can see those here. Those are all set to hold. Planned line work is just set to go out because it only lasts like the 12 frames for the moment. So what you need to do, first of all, to find the CTG layers is you go to New, Color and Texture layer. So it's created there, and it gets dropped underneath your line work by default. For this, I'm going to set it up so that it works with a source. So here you have your source footage. What this means is this is the footage that it's referencing when it comes to how it decides where the boundary of the color should be. So I'm going to have it just work with plant line. I don't want it working with the plant pot because the leaf overlaps a little bit here on the front. So there is a CTL plant L layer. And you can select multiple layers, and if you create a new CTL, it will create them with 2 sources, so it will link whatever layers you've selected. For the moment, I'll just work with the one here. So one thing to consider with the CTG kind of process is it works quite well when you've got fully enclosed areas, and there's other ways you can kind of finesse it if there are areas that are not closed, because you can work with CTG layers. So if you have your plant line work, your black line, and then you have a color separation line that is on another layer, you can use that color separation line as a different source. So if you have like shadows or anything like that, you can very quickly get across what you're doing. So here I'm going to use this guy and get a bit of a nice green if it exists. And you'll see that you have these areas grayed out here. So you don't have, say, the pencil tool, the other airbrush tools and all these textured brush tools and things like that as well. All you have is the speed fill brush and an eraser brush. And you can see this is set to color. It has its size, same as usual. It does have this little switch here called exclusion. I'll show you what that does once I colorize the first one. So 5, I might just put this up to 10 to make it a little bit more roomy. And so then if you draw a line, you see it's just drawing a line. I'm just trying to fill up all the little gaps. Kind of coming into contact with all the areas that do have fill. And you can see it's automatically filled up. Here, here, here. I need to zoom in here a bit. This little straggler there. And you can even increase the size if it's a little bit fiddly. And increasing the size is a direct correlation with the influence this color has on other marks, if there's other kind of CTG marks. So now, just to bring you down to the actual layer itself here, you have an option here. If you click on that, it shows a few different. You use a texturizer, so you can apply textures to colors. You can load structures from sources, so if you're bringing in footage, it references it. You can also apply squiggles on empty instances. So as in it will, if there's a blank frame, it will try and apply color. And instances with the same name, so similarly anything that's matching. Then we have extract color, all colors separately, all colors in the same layer, and extract and anti-aliasing is an option as well. So with this switched on, it gives you a tiny bit better quality, but it's not as crisp. So if you're going to export colors in the same layer, I would leave that switched off. It allows you to separate the colors much easier if you need to in comp. But if you're exporting out colors separately, you want to select all colors separately, and you can leave this switched on. It'll just give it a little bit of a feather around the edge. Make sure it's not too crunchy. Here you have the little line work. So if I switch it off, you can see the line reappears, disappears, and so on. Then you have apply changes here. So at the moment it's just set to apply as we go. But you can lock it afterwards if need be. So one thing you'll notice here that I might just switch off the pot so we can see it better. We have the line work here, and goes up and around. That pot there. There's a little bit that we can extend it down by. Go into my flat line. So you can see I've brought it down a little bit there. Similarly here. Similarly here. So this is like just little kind of cleanup things you can do quite quickly using this process. That one's okay because it overlaps. Come down. The next thing you can do is, okay, I'm going to add a new layer. This is where I'll show you the way to use color separation line. So animation layer, I'll just call it. I'll colorize it green. I'll colorize this one as well to nice red, actually, less disgusting green. Mark across there. Big keyframe here. Weird. It can be erased. That one's cleaned up a tiny bit. And then that one's okay there. So now we have our ETL layers. We have our little plant line, and we have salt separation. Now if we go back in here and we add a new source, see that the bottom edge should update. Cool. And that's using the color separation. Again, we can switch off the color separation layer. We don't even see it. And now if we were to select our color paint layer, cool. So you can see it does a pretty good job of filling things in. Gotta make the brush a little bit bigger. And there it goes. And then I think there's a little bit at the bottom as well. So as you can see, it's doing a bit of business. Just tweaking your sizes depending on how fiddly the little bits are. So 10 is probably a good size for it to be. Back on. You don't need to do everything all at once. But there you have that area. And again, this is generally much quicker than trying to paint bucket stuff. And I'll show you an added benefit it has as well when it comes to spinning out your layers, especially if you have any like blush layers or things like that. I would, if there's layers that you need a discrete overlay kind of things working on, like shadows or some highlights maybe, I would do that on a separate CTG layer. That way you have a bit more fine control over those elements, because if you work on one layer, it kind of just melds all the layers together in there. So if you have a shadow layer overlapping with a flat fill layer, this area here will get kind of a combination of both colors, if you know what I mean, or it'll overwrite the face color. So if you do want a little bit more control with your shadows, I do recommend having a separate CTG layer. Okay. Here I'm just tweaking this one. I have auto break instances set up as well, so it's not going to interfere with the previous ones. And then this one here. And I'll switch off the line work, and so I see missed anything. There's little things here that this should be the background peeking through. You can see maybe there's one back here as well. Oh, as well. This the bud. Zoom into that one. Cool. And again, I am using the color separation layer for the base. As you can see here, we have a little bit of cutouts we need here and there. And the best way to do that is using not the eraser tool, which again may seem a bit counterintuitive, but taking this box as exclusion, and that just means it's going to exclude it from the ink paint. And yeah, I might make this a bit smaller, maybe 5. We can really see the areas we're working with. So this area here, I'm going to exclude that. And this area there. So again, you can kind of be as neat about it as you want, but you don't necessarily need to worry too much about what the line work is looking like. If I switch this on, see this is a little blue tint. That's just like exclusion switch. So regardless of whatever color you use, it kind of uses that. So you kind of find it useful at least to have the line work switched off when you're working in exclusion mode. It means you can quickly see the result rather than having to switch stuff on and off. Might have to do the erase here for this a small bit because of where the line work is. With the eraser tool, switch this guy on. Yeah, it's a little bit thick on the edges here. And that looks good. And the final one then, small little bit there, might work. A little bit of eraser tool. Very good. The final colored animation works really well. Next thing you might do is create another CTL layer for the plant pot. I'm going to go color and texture layer. And this one doesn't need to carry on. It's only one held frame. But I can kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to make a mustardy color with this one. And shadows casting left, so I'm going to have a darker shadow on the left side. I'm going to have a lighter shadow on the right side. And I'm going to have some soil then. Here. Switch off my CTL layers. Switch up my opacity, these guys all the way. And shift my order around. This is now sitting on top. So you can see it's flicking off, and on. The line work will hold. This is a peculiarity of the CTL stuff, is that you can't really apply timing to it. It needs to just actually extend out the layer. Because how it works is it reprocesses based on whatever line work the source is. So if you don't extend it out, it doesn't know where to stop processing. So one way is you could do it is you could just extend it out that. Another way is just extend it out by adding more keyframes. But a secondary way is the next stage, which is kind of useful in general. I kind of call it baking in the colors, because it means that you know the colors aren't going to shift. So it's non-destructive though. You still have your CTL layer to start off with. So I'm going to just do it with this guy here. I'm going to rename this C for color. Same with this guy. So we have this guy as well, and you can see that if I wanted to extend out this scene to, say, I just know this from testing this out earlier on. So if I want to extend this out to 145 frames for the endpoint, and I wanted this to loop, it's kind of a pain to have it loop out to the end of this, because you have to duplicate all those frames, and you can't just set this to loop. It doesn't work like that, the CTG layers. Your CTL options here, your little palette, click on that, extract color, and for this one it just has the green, so I'm not really worried about it. If I had another layer of say the underside of the leaf or the top side of the leaf being a slightly different color, I'd adjust that, but this one can just go all to the same layer. Cool. So here we have plant colors, and I'm going to just trim this back and pull out the CTL part. Right, and now the thing about it, because you've converted it basically into a raster, you can set this to loop now, and so it will loop. Make your life a lot easier. I can do the same process then with this, and because this is several different colors, I'm actually going to use the next process, extract color, all colors separately. This is just to show you how you can do it, really, more than anything else. Go back here, start one. Now we have different colors, and you can just do a little bit of naming here. But one thing is, what I'm going to do is just select a nice green for the actual color layer. So orange is CTL by default, or CTG. These guys I'm going to change to a nice green. And then I'm just going to check which color is which. I think it's the order in which you drew it. It kind of applies it. Is for the first frame. So I'll call this shade. This is font high. Just using a nice short name helps things a little bit. Okay, now we can also set this out. Have this basically loop to the end, or have it hold. You know, once it gets to the end, really, it doesn't really matter how you do it. And now as you play it through. Okay, so that is the CTG process. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of how to work with the camera. So the camera tool here is set up like so. It has kind of a default sizing that you can adjust. This, I've set it up so that the project size is twice the camera resolution. Do that by going into new project, going project with camera. You set up a 1920 1080 project, and you want the camera to have, say, about 2x zoom, or at least the capacity for 2x zoom. You can just change this to 200% and adjust it. Automatically updates your figures here. If you have any kind of baseline project that has like a gutter around the edge as well, this one is not really important because all the animation is happening in the middle of the frame. But if there's other scenes where you wanted that 10%, 15% gutter around the edge, you would just add it on here, 2100, let's say, 1120, we'll call it. And then it automatically scales up the other bits as well. So it's a handy way just to keep track of things, especially if you know that you need to zoom in a lot. because then you will have to up this number, and it will have the default camera then at 100% within that. You can see this is at 100%, so the pixels won't get any bigger for the moment. I'm going to have the camera start off at the bottom, and you can create a new camera by just clicking outside of the center point of the first camera, and it creates a new camera point there. And I can also create a new camera point there. This I'm also going to right click and go fit to project. So it's going to zoom out at the end. Zoom out myself a little bit here. And you can finesse how much you want it to zoom out, you know, in the same way you normally would with any edge points. But it's just handy to be able to right click and go, okay, you zoom out to full composition size. Now you hit play and you notice it's not really doing anything with the camera. That's because you just set it to work with the camera, which is this little button here. If you click on this button, it crops into whatever the camera work is. And you can also set it up here to show camera or not show camera. Cool. So one thing that's happening, you'll notice, is it's actually doing the camera move for the full duration of the scene. And that is because of how the camera keying works. The camera keying will actually only work with the number of frames that are populated within your scene. So if you have, as we have here, the last frame is frame 12, so it's 6 drawings on 2s, then it will only do the camera move up until that point. Which is a bit of a pain if you have a hold and you don't want to extend stuff out. Quick and easy way to adjust it though is just going out here with this guy and bringing it to the end point of your composition. You can even bring it a little bit before the end point if you want to have the camera move come to a resting stop. So here is our little action. I can see it's doing a little bit of business. It goes up. You can see though it is doing some funky scaling. So see the way here, it goes in, out again. There's ways in which you can adjust your camera tool again. We have mode smart spline. It can be linear. Set that to linear. It means it will move along axes that are linear. It goes up and then out. It's quite simple. If you move it, set it to smart spline, it moves up, in a little bit, then out. You can kind of see how it's adjusting that inner point. So now, again, spline goes all the way in. Smart spline does not go as far in. And that's because it's anticipating having to extend out the camera at the end. I would work with smart spline or linear generally, just to make your life a little bit easier. There you go. And you may ask yourself now, okay, the camera move ends at this point here, frame 141, but how can I control the timing within that? Because all it is doing, you'll see it goes to 141, so it's that one at exactly a third of the way in. Next keyframe, it goes in to the endpoint then. Like there's not really a lot of logic for why it's hitting, say, certain points, beyond the fact that it's just equally distributing them along the timeline. So what you can do is you can adjust it with the time profile. So time profile is a handy tool, but it's a little bit different than maybe what you've been used to working with for camera if you've used basically any other software. But it allows you to have a little bit more fine control over things. You can also set this to spline. That doesn't affect your kind of camera displacement. It just affects the timing of that displacement. So you can have a nice little ease. It basically breaks it down by distance here, or well, by key position. So as many key positions you have, you subdivide the vertical, and then the time works across that. Now you have a little bit of an easier move from the start, then it sweeps out a little bit. The time again, if you know that you're at this mark here, see that it's not doing anything too severe. Even bring this down again. How it's adjusting where that camera point is. Have it there. Then I can create another point here. Have a little bit of an ease out. That's a bit more gradual on that camera move. What's up? So again, you can adjust this so it works with linear, polynomial, and all this kind of stuff. It just accentuates the arcs basically of that timing. But I think spline tends to be what I would use because it gives you a little bit of control over the ease, but it doesn't go too crazy. It would be nice if you could switch between linear and spline along the same line here, but you can either have one or the other. So that is the camera work. And the camera moves slow enough that it doesn't matter that the animation's on 2s. In any case, there is our camera move. And that's how you work with the camera in TVPaint. Okay, so once you have the camera set up, you can use a method to export it out, so you can do what you want with it. And there's several ways you can go about that. One way is that you go to export to, go to clip display, and then we have the usual kind of options. You can export as a single image, sequence, PNG, RGBA, use the project size, or you can also use the camera size. So with the camera size, or the camera function, it just basically bakes in the camera move into whatever you export. That can be a handy way if you're updating, say, animatic stuff, but if you're actually trying to use it for production, you want a small bit of control over how you work with the camera in comp. You don't want this destructive process where you're cutting out the edges around your animation. And you might still want a little bit of control over how many layers there are, as well as not having to manually label the folders, label the layer names, all this kind of stuff. So what you can do is you can actually export with clip layer structure. And how this works is you can select PSD and go down to a few options here. You can export as an old TVPaint project, a PSD, CSV, which is a PNG with a script file that has a timing. We have Flix file, which is I'm not familiar with it, so I'll have to double check what that is later on. JSON is what I tend to use though. Named images, sprite generator. So again, these all have different functions basically, or different usages. But because we're going to use it for After Effects, I'm going to use JSON, because that maintains not only the layer naming, but also the layer labeling, so the colors of the layers, as well as the timing of the layers. It all lets you maintain that without having to have loads of files. So if this is a 145 frame scene or 156 frame scene, it means that you don't have as much bloat in the file and folders, because you only have those 6 initial drawings along with the color fills, the background, and the text either side. So while I'm on the subject of that, I'll just make sure to switch on the text layer. Yeah, cool. I'll label that with a blue. File, export to, and then we can set this to JSON. All this is by default pretty okay. You can export all images, export visible layers, or write the JSON file, and you can manually switch all these on or off. I would tend to have export all images, visible layers, and write JSON file switched on. The folder name and file name structure, you wouldn't worry too much about that. There's a little bit of a cheat sheet if you hover above it. It tells you what each one of those things does. What we have here is percentage. 3, so that's the sequence kind of image numbers. And then we have file name pattern, so that's just the layer name with a dash basically. We have PNGs, bitmaps, targets, all this kind of stuff. PNGs are your friends, so we tend to use PNGs. You can set the compression down lower if you wanted. Convert to, no conversion, HDTV, HD 1080p. And this is actually not what I want. I want this set to 3840. So this is just something you gotta double check. 840, 2160. So just to make sure it has the resolution of the whole file. So now we can select our folder, my little plant folder here. Cool, I'll hit save, hit export. That's going to export out these 6 images on the line work and also the fills for the plant, and then the additional line work for the pot, title, and the 3 color layers for the pot. So that is the process for working in TVPaint and getting those files out of TVPaint once you've colored them. Okay. Thanks for watching.